The presenting sponsor for On Education is Schoology. Schoology is not only the best learning management system, it's also a community of lifelong learners. Join On Education at Schoology Next Conference, July 16th through 18th in San Diego, California. This is a chance to immerse yourselves in hands-on workshops, advanced product training sessions, and best practice presentations. If you want to learn more about Schoology and how they can help you advance what's possible, visit Schoology.com.
Get off my lawn! Welcome to On Education. I am Mike Washburn.
And I'm Glen Irvin. Friends, we have an amazing pod for you today. We will definitively answer the question on everyone's mind, Laurel or Yanny. We will discuss the tragic shooting this week in Texas and cap off the podcast, talking to the designer of the app, taking the teaching world by storm, Josh Feinsilver of Gimkit.
Laurel versus Yanny.
Yes. It's amazing to me how we get captivated by things like this.
I love it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of like that dress. Remember that dress that it was either green or blue or some weird color or something like that, depending upon the way you looked at it? There you go, yeah.
Gold, right?
Was it blue or was it gold? Is it Laurel or is it Yanny? This one is interesting because of the science behind it, right?
Right. Well, it's way more interesting because of the science. There's actually a legit science discussion that happens surrounding this, which is pretty wild. It has to do with the way that different people perceive frequencies of audio, and depending on your personal perception of frequency, you hear different things. And I had a funny conversation. You actually saw, I know you saw it on Facebook, with my cousin who got all get off my lawn on me about thinking this was pretty interesting or funny, and he's like, aren't there better things to worry about in the world? And I'm like, yeah, I mean, there are, but can we have this moment, please? I think that doesn't seem inappropriate. But I also mentioned in the same post as a response that I actually had a pretty decent conversation with my students about what this is and what it means and how it works. And the New York Times did me a favor and posted a slide. There was a slider, okay, that shifted the frequency of the audio clip depending, and as you shifted the frequency, people would hear different things. Oh, and it would tell you, right, and it would tell you, where your personal and everyone's level of the slider was different depending on your personal perception of the frequency of audio. So
even though we're all the same, we're all different.
Right, we are all special snowflakes.
That's pretty cool, though. I mean, that's like obviously it's weird how these things blow up, but it leads to an interesting conversation like you just had with your students about basically the auditory process, and that's very interesting, especially if you're into sound technology. Like you and I are musicians, and playing music and how it's perceived, to a crowd could be really different. So that's awesome. I like that.
It was pretty sweet. I enjoyed the conversation. I love these kind of teaching moments. I like the opportunity to talk about the things that are just kind of on the internet. I show a lot of videos of things like SpaceX launches and just stuff that goes viral, and there's teaching opportunities everywhere. And
absolutely.
Laurel versus Yanny is no exception. So are you a Laurel or a Yanny?
You know what? I actually had the experience where the first couple of times I heard Laurel, and then I don't know if I convinced myself that I was hearing Yanny then, you know what I mean? So then from this point forward, all I hear is Yanny. So I don't know what that's about.
I had a fun time messing with the kids with this slider, because one of the things the slider also did was condition your brain to hearing the other things. So you would put it all the way to one side and they would hear Laurel. And then every time after that, even if you slid it almost all the way to the other side, you would tell yourself that you're hearing Laurel still, and you would hear Laurel.
Interesting.
Pretty fun little mental conditioning thing. I heard Laurel pretty much all the way till, like, you had to go on that slider thing. You had to push it pretty far to the other side for me to start hearing Yanny.
Yeah.
So it was a neat week. I liked it. It was fun on the bus for 20 minutes.
Yeah,
at least.
talking about that, you had an awesome student and teacher experience by taking students all the way to the big city of Chicago. That's awesome. So tell us a little bit about Chicago.
Well, it's a big city.
It's so awesome, yes.
The drive from Toronto to Chicago is about 8.5 hours if you don't stop.
Yeah.
So our drive was, in the 10-hour range each way.
Wow.
So a lot of time, a lot of bonding time on the bus. A lot of candy was eaten. Because that's what kids do.
That's what I would do too.
A lot of Fortnite was played on mobile devices. That happened quite a bit. And Clash Royale happened quite a bit.
Oh, yeah.
And some Black Panther happened a couple times, I guess. So we take the grades 7s and 8s every year to a place in the U.S. and go for 4 days. Most of the first day and the last day are driving home, so there's 2 days in between where we did everything. It's a pretty packed day. We're out the door at 8 o'clock, and we're not back until 9 or 10 at night on the Tuesday and the Wednesday.
Yeah.
And we saw, we saw the Field Museum, we went to the Chicago History Museum, we went to the aquarium, we went to Millennium Park, saw the Bean. We went up to the top of Willis Tower and and did the windows where you can look down straight down. My favorite part was the architectural boat tour. So they take you on a boat and you go through the Chicago River, and where it forks, you go one way and then they come back around and go the other way. And the narrator, the tour guide was amazing.
Those
like just
are
absolutely
they're
absolutely
ridiculous.
pro. It was astonishing how awesome he was. And obviously it's a script, but he delivered it so very, very well. And it was really, really entertaining and super informative. I wouldn't look at buildings the same probably ever again, to be perfectly honest. I couldn't believe the thought that went into some of the buildings. And maybe Chicago's unique in that regard. I guarantee you that the skyscrapers in Toronto are not built with the intent of complementing the skyscrapers beside them or across the river from the other ones.
Interesting, huh?
And taking into consideration the reflection that it would cast on the water and stuff like that. But in Chicago, awesome. That's exactly what they're doing when they're building some of these things, especially the ones that are right on the river.
On the river, yeah.
And it was pretty astonishing. It was awesome. We obviously had some pizza.
Yeah, of course.
Which was pretty great.
Yes.
We went to a huge mall that was right downtown, 7 floors, this mall. It was absolutely massive. Lots of chances. The kids love gift stores. And I find
so
that
they were
a little
buying
bit
all
weird.
kinds of different things.
Oh my god! Just constantly wanting to buy
T-shirts?
souvenirs, T-shirts. We went on a bit of a stuffed animal frenzy, or just stuffies of all shapes and sizes. One student bought a giant llama, just because.
Just because they could.
Sure, why not? And it was a really fun time. I genuinely I love teaching older kids. Now, this year I teach grade 3 to 8. Next year I'll be teaching just grade 6 to 8.
Yeah.
And that's kind of my wheelhouse, to be honest, in terms of, what I like to teach. My favorite grade to teach is probably grade 6. And I'm really looking forward to teaching just grade 6, 7, and 8. And so I genuinely liked being with these kids. They have a good sense of humor. They're mature enough that you can have, funny conversation with them and it not be, whatever, right? You can talk to them like they're a little bit older because they are. So it was a great time. We had a really, really good time in Chicago. And listen, we're going back to Chicago I'm going back and you're meeting me there.
Yes.
In what's that? 5 weeks. Holy moly.
It's getting here. Wow. ISTE conference.
Right.
Yes.
So we will be at ISTE. We are going to be interviewing, I know at least we're going to be interviewing the president of ISTE.
Nice.
We've lined up interviewing some of our friends as well. People who haven't been on the podcast yet, but are pretty big names in the education space. I'm not going to say any of them right now because we haven't firmed up times and stuff like that. We've been invited to go to some pretty cool events. We're going to Carl Hooker's Poetry Slam.
Nice.
Which is pretty slick.
Yes.
Carl shot us out an invite, and I guess I'm spilling the beans that he's probably going to be on the pod as well. And we're going to the Badge Summit. So lots going on.
Super excited about all those events. And Chicago's awesome. So can't wait, man.
Pretty pumped. Twitter. Give me a Twitter happening.
There was. I mean, obviously, we'll talk about Friday in a little bit later in the podcast. But I mean, as far as Twitter, it was pretty quiet. I thought something amazing happened though. I was just walking through our corridors we have a gigantic high school, and the choir director decided to pull his choir out and put them up on the second floor of this corridor, and then they sang a song by U2, and it was just one of those moments where you just stop whatever you're heading towards a certain mission. You know how at the end of the school year you're running,
right,
and you forget that you have these amazing, beautiful moments that are occurring in your schools. And so I just recorded their, impromptu performance, and then I posted it on YouTube, tagged the teacher and all of our staff, and really just I'm challenging people to say, hey, there's all of these special moments that are happening during these last weeks of school. Put them out there so that other people can get inspired by them, and show your kids that you really do, that you obviously do care about them, and then say, hey, check this out. You're doing some amazing things, even all the way up until the last weeks of school. So I'm challenging people on Twitter to tag us at On Education Podcast and tell us, like, what are some awesome things. Send us a picture, a little video, whatever it might be, of things that are happening, special moments that are happening during these last few weeks of school, because they're happening. And we, a lot of the time, Twitter and the rest of social media is just overly abundantly dominated by negative news. So let's have some special moments together and retweet those things, like and retweet those things that are happening at other places, because, hey, awesome things are occurring.
Yeah, I mean, if you tag us, we'll retweet it. We're pretty consistent on that. I'll be sharing some of the stuff I do, but I don't do my big super fun stuff until like the very last week of school. But I think I've mentioned it before, I bring in my Oculus Rift for the last week of school, which is pretty rad.
I want to see some stuff on that. Yes.
Yeah, the kids absolutely love it. So we'll be doing that. Talk about code.org teacher workshops.
Yes. So I have a friend, her name is Angie Kaltoff. She doesn't even know I'm doing this. But
hi, Angie.
Hey Angie, you're so awesome, by the way. And she is facilitating all of these code.org workshops. And the most amazing part is, number one, it's free. It's a 7-hour professional development learning opportunity where you develop the skills to take it back to your own schools and school districts. It's completely free. She even has food. The hours could count towards your teacher license, or at least it does in Minnesota. So she's doing hers in Minnesota, but this happens throughout the country and probably in Canada too, right, Mike?
I would assume so. I haven't seen anything, and I didn't attend anything like this when I started using code.org, but I assume it exists. I don't have a doubt that it exists. I'll be honest, maybe I should be doing one of these myself, but
Well, they're just amazing, great learning opportunities, and even it says beginners are encouraged to attend. And we will, in the show notes, provide a link to specifically Angie's connection for Minnesota. Yeah. But we will also just encourage you to go to code.org, find your local trainers, and find out where they're actually doing the trainings at, when this summer. Go attend that workshop. It's free. Code.org is so awesome. And you can get the professional development that you need to be able to go in and have it, be able to use it at your school districts.
Listen, if you're a teacher and you were looking for the window or the door to walk through to start using coding and games-based learning even in your classroom that had a really low barrier to entry and was super easy to learn, code.org is it.
That is it.
It is the definitive tool for K to 5 for sure, for teaching coding. And you should really just head on over there and play around. That's the best way you're going to learn. And you're going to see, I have all the confidence in the world that if you give this a shot, if you just go there and start messing around on code.org, you're going to see all the things that you can do with it.
Absolutely.
And you won't regret it. And then you'll find ways to use it in your classroom. But if you were, like I said, looking for that pain-free way to teach yourself how to integrate coding into the classroom, this is something to do for sure. When we come back, we're going to take a quick break, and then we will address what happened in Texas this past week and tackle the gun control conversation just a little bit.
The end of the school year is finally here, and we have an awesome professional development opportunity. Badge Summit 2018 is happening at Columbia College on June 23rd in Chicago, Illinois. This one-day event brings together some of the brightest and most inspiring digital badge thought leaders on the planet for highly interactive learning and sharing. Attendance is limited to 250 people, so get signed up. For more information, go to badgesummit.weebly.com.
Welcome back. Well, this is becoming too common. This week there was another school shooting at Santa Fe High School in Santa Fe, Texas. This is the third school shooting in the past 7 days, and the 22nd since the beginning of the year in the U.S. I don't really have words really much anymore. I have a lot of notes, and I'm gonna read something a little bit later, but I'm kind of running out of things to say about stuff like this. It's astounding to me what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, tragedy is not even, when I was writing you, we were texting back and forth. It's
Right.
tragedy is not a strong enough word. It's just ridiculous, and it's everywhere. And so we in the United States have to be prepared for it to happen, near home. And that's just sick and scary. So yeah, no, I'm with you, man. There are no words anymore.
I saw a tweet where the person said, I can't believe that the phrase school shooting is actually a thing. The idea that, we even use that kind of vocabulary to describe something like that, this actually happens, and then that's a real word that we say.
Yeah.
And not that we really say it, it's the frequency in which you say it as well is mind-blowing. What is even more mind-blowing is...
Oh, my goodness. I know.
You know what I'm going to say.
Yes.
Well, I mean, I know you see the notes, but holy crap. File under winner of the week is Texas Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. This guy blamed Friday's massacre at a high school near Houston in part on too many entrances and too many exits on the campus.
Gosh.
Door control is what we
Yes.
need. We don't need gun control. We need door control. The question I wrote in the notes, and I'm just going to read it because whatever. But I wrote, am I reading this right, or is this guy really that stupid? Glenn, can you answer that for me?
Well, I'm not going to... I don't know. I mean, you are reading it right. He did say that, and I think they believe that he believes this. So, I mean...
Does he understand that doors are how people escape things?
Yeah, and I mean, of course, there's all these implications about fire, hazards and fire codes. The way that we build schools have to do so that we can escape from the school if something bad occurs in it really quickly. You want an exit near your wherever your classroom's at, and it has to be within a specific distance. That's how codes are. The building codes are made
Law.
so that's exactly. So that's
You're talking about law.
Exactly. It's the law. It's the law. And to have one door that leads into the bunker called your school, it's just like,
Right.
I mean, come on. It's just, again, twisting what are the actual issues and not having to face those things and then saying, oh, no, it's because of this. And, on that same perspective, and I don't think we wrote it on here anywhere, so I don't want to steal our thunder, is that, when people say we need more security, these schools have security.
There's two.
We have security. I mean, honestly, we have an armed police officer who is designated to just our high school, right?
Sure.
And he also has, we have occasional other police officers that, just do their duties as far as around the school just to keep us safe. But that doesn't mean that that's going to prevent any of this from occurring. You know what I mean? Like,
there were two cops in this high school.
Yeah. Yes. And we have some big schools. That school is a pretty significantly large school. And even if it wasn't, it doesn't mean that if the police officer is in the wrong place, when this all occurs, they can only do so much. It's not like we have armed guards throughout the whole entire school or something like that,
You can't
no, and that's not going to...
cop in each classroom.
Yes, exactly. So, yes, it's ridiculous. Tell us more.
I wanted to read this Facebook post that's kind of making its way around by the chief of police for the city of Houston.
Yes.
Because I think that, when I read it, I feel like it's articulating a lot of the feelings that I have personally as well.
Yeah.
And I found it absolutely amazing. And I'm just gonna read it. It's not too long.
Okay, read it.
So, quote, "To all my Facebook friends, today I spent the day dealing with another mass shooting of children and a responding police officer who is clinging to life. I'm not ashamed to admit I've shed tears of sadness, pain, and anger. I know some have strong feelings about gun rights, but I want you to know I've hit rock bottom, and I'm not interested in your views as it pertains to this issue. Please do not post anything about guns aren't the problem, and there's little we can do. My feelings won't be hurt if you defriend me, and I hope yours won't be if you decide to post about your views and I defriend you. I have never accepted the status quo in anything I do, and I've never accepted defeat, and I won't do it now. I will continue to speak up, and I will stand up for what my heart and my God commands me to do, and I assure you, he hasn't instructed me to believe that gun rights are bestowed by him." I love that line.
Yes.
"The hatred being spewed in our country is the new norms we, so-called people of faith, are accepting, is as much to blame for so much of the violence in our once pragmatic nation. This isn't a time for prayers and study and inaction. It's a time for prayers, action, and the asking of God's forgiveness for our inaction, especially the elected officials that ran to the cameras today, acted in a solemn manner, called for prayers, and will once again do absolutely nothing."
That's a powerful line right there.
I close by saying, I wish those that move on from this page the best. May God bless you and keep you. I mean, it's astounding. It's everything. It's all of the feelings.
He has to work, and he's the one who had to go into those buildings and pull kids out. You know what I mean? Yeah. He's the one who has to stand beside his coworker and hope that he doesn't pass away, And so, it's just sick. It's a sickening feeling. As soon as it happens, on Friday morning when it was happening, I was just like, this is just,
right.
Again, and really the question is, when does this actually end? It's not about, this is a once, in a blue moon kind of thing. No, this is happening all the time now. So when will we do the things that we need to do in order to make this stop? And that's the question.
The problem is, obviously, the NRA just has more money than the other side. And your elected officials are pretty easily bought. When the NRA can just pay more than, I can't remember Bloomberg's organization, but he's probably got the biggest one. But it's amazing, first off, that Bloomberg, has this organization and isn't dumping just tons of money into it, I guess. I'm not gonna go after him though, I guess. But the NRA has a truckload of money, and
Yes.
they spend it on, Marco Rubio. And then Marco Rubio goes out and talks about guns not being the problem. And I'd love to see how much contributions the NRA made to this, Genius of the Month, Lieutenant Governor.
No, I think that the biggest thing that we can do is talk about, this sheriff says that it's a time for action. And really, as a people, here's what we can go ahead and do. In November, go vote for people that that are taking this issue seriously and that are going to bring out solutions to this problem. Not just words about whatever it might be, but actually going to vote for policy that makes changes about why this is occurring. The accessibility of arms, for example, to kids. And just the accessibility of arms to people that should not have them. And the accessibility of firearms that are military grade firearms. All of it down the line. And someone said something, it was ridiculous. That the type of firearms that this person brought in weren't the military grade, so those aren't the problem. It's like, no. This is a kid. And they had open access to these weapons, and they weren't locked down, and nobody feels like they need to go ahead and do that. You know what I mean? Like, in other words, they don't need to lock it down because there's no policy against that. You need to lock your stuff down. You need to make sure that they're safe, and they aren't easily accessible by children. By kids.
It's a culture. It's a culture of gun ownership that is reaffirmed by an outdated Second Amendment. The reality is, if you go to somewhere like Windsor, Ontario, which is literally across the river from Houston or from Detroit, there are, I bet you, per capita, per person in Windsor, there's maybe one gun per 10,000 people.
Sure.
And in Detroit, which is you could shoot a one wood across the river.
Yeah.
And hit a building in Detroit from the edge of the river in Windsor. And on
there's
the
guns
other
everywhere.
side of the river, there's guns everywhere.
Yeah. It's
everywhere.
Yeah.
Like, the ratio of guns per person in the U.S. is more than 1 to 1, I think.
Yeah. It is. It is. It's ridiculous and sick.
And so
yeah.
This is a culture thing. You guys have an issue with access to guns and the feeling of need. And this quote, this idea that people believe that it's their God-given right. I will continue to speak up and stand up for what my heart and my God commands me to do. And I assure you, he hasn't instructed me to believe that gun rights are bestowed by him. The idea that gun rights are a God-given thing, it manifests destiny, right, is the most, it's insane.
Yeah.
It is literally insane.
It's sickening, and I hope that for the rest of this school year, at least,
we need to keep our kids safe.
We don't have to talk about this again, because this is it's just sickening again, and I feel horrible for all those people that are directly affected by that, and actually, all of our students are directly affected because we don't know when it's going to happen next or where. It's not restricted to a specific location or whatever it might be. So,
right.
Yeah.
I mean, we could just go on and on and on,
yes.
but this isn't meant to be, that sort of thing. We're gonna keep talking about it as it comes up. And listen, I mean, let's be real here. It's gonna come up again. Hopefully, it doesn't come up, for a while. But until we've actually fixed the problem, until you actually fix your problem down there, it's gonna happen again. Yeah. So we're gonna move on, and when we come back, we're gonna talk about this is really interesting. We're gonna talk about respect and doctors and teachers and the difference between the two.
On Education is brought to you by Audible.
Audible. So, hey, Glenn, you're reading a book right now.
Yes.
Or listening to a book, I guess.
Yeah, reading, listening. Actually, more listening. And I think you're going to be really excited about this one. I am listening to Super Better by Jane McGonigal.
Yes.
Of course, I've read Reality is Broken various times, and I have it bookmarked and posted, noted, and highlighted. And so I actually listened to Jane McGonigal, and a lot of her presentation, one of the times that I've heard her, was about Super Better. And now that I'm actually being able to listen to it, I'm about halfway through it. It is such an awesome, fascinating book, basically about just making us better people. And so highly recommend it to anybody. Again, I'm about halfway through, and it is just fantastic.
Super Better. So if you want to listen to Super Better by Jane McGonigal, or even Reality is Broken by Jane McGonigal, we're big Jane McGonigal fans here.
Yes.
Hey, Jane, come on the podcast.
Oh, that would be awesome.
Create an account on Audible today by visiting audibletrial.com/oneducation. That's audibletrial.com/oneducation and receive a free audiobook download. All right, welcome back to the show. A really interesting article came across Glen and I's desks this week, Doctors versus Teachers. Well, the name of the article was called, I Was a Doctor, Now I'm a Teacher. Why don't I get the same level of respect? We both found it super interesting. Tell us a little bit about the article, Glen, and kind of your thoughts on it to start, I guess.
I think that, the most powerful part is that you have this person who decides to go from the medical profession as a doctor, and then end up being a teacher, and then finds out that there's so many levels of what they refer to as disrespect, which we call the status quo. It's so sick. The things all coming from pay and benefits, all the way down to just the way that society views you. When you're speaking about you're a teacher, your profession, or whatever it might be, there's such a distinction between being a doctor and then a teacher. And man, I was blown away by reading this, and we'll go ahead and link it in our show notes. I highly recommend reading it. It's not super long, but it is super powerful. Just to say, hey, what we think of as the status quo is actually not good. It's not a good thing for us, as far as being respected as a teacher. What did you get out of it?
Well, it resonated with me because one of the things that I've thought about a lot over the last number of years is the idea that I don't go to my doctor's office and tell my doctor how to be a doctor. And I don't go to my dentist's office and tell him how to be a dentist. I don't go to my carpenter and tell him how to build my deck, and I don't go to my car repair shop even and tell him how to fix my car. And I know a lot about education. I don't know how to fix my car, frankly. I don't. Well, and I did build my own deck, but I did a lot of research. But I don't know anything about medicine, and I don't know anything about dentistry. Yet it never ceases to amaze me how many people think they know all about education,
especially politicians. That's where the sickest part comes from. The decision making that is made at our state levels and local levels, and of course national levels, is ridiculous if it's not driven by educators. That's where it should be at. And of course, I'm not exactly sure if that, I don't feel like that would happen in Canada, but it definitely happens in the United States, where we have all of these different types of mandates where you go, where did that idea come from? Well, it was driven by someone who has not worked in education, and number two, usually driven by a special interest. You know what I mean? Like we talked about testing companies and those kinds of things, where there's some certain kind of money being pushed out to legislators to pass certain things. And
speaking of standardized testing, this is also where you see it coming out in the parents and the public, too, right? The discussion around standardized testing is a very nuanced, complicated, intricate discussion that needs to happen about the nature of standardized testing and assessment, and determining how we understand whether students have met learning goals and objectives, and checking for mastery. And I can guarantee you the average parent doesn't have a friggin' clue what I just said.
Well, and if they do, too many times things are tainted by, I think, by media. Do you know what I mean? So it's easier to report, like, I'm going to give the school a report card grade and say they deserve an F because of standardized testing and graduation rates, where you're not really looking at the nuanced things because it's too complex, like you just said. Instead, you're just looking at something that's just is a blurb, a little quick boom, boom, and then, hey, things are going great, or, oh my goodness, how are things going so badly there? Do you know what I mean?
So, yeah, 100%. So, I mean, I can talk about standardized, and I'm not telling parents and people not to have discussions about standardized testing. If you have a kid, then you have at least some sort of a voice in this conversation. You do. You have a right because you have a kid, but who participates in this process. But I just want. It is about respect. It's about respecting that I may shockingly know a little bit more about this than you. I don't assume. Listen, if you're a car repair person, a mechanic, I'm going to assume that you know more about car repair than me. Please, God, know more about car repair than me. And so I'm not. I'm going to defer to your judgment when we're having a conversation about whether it's the timing belt or the alternator.
Yes.
I'm fine with that. I should be fine with that. I shouldn't assume that, because, my car mechanic thinks it's the timing belt and I think it's the alternator that I'm right. The odds are that I'm wrong. And I would just appreciate some deference.
Yes.
To that reality.
Sure.
That Glen and I and other teachers are experts at this. And frankly, we know what we're talking about. And so it comes down to respect. And this is a frustrating conversation to have with people. This EQAO stuff that's going on is pretty important stuff, and it requires more than just, I know what's best for my kid, and I think that my kid should take this math test.
Yes, and I mean, ultimately, I think it's a like a culture thing that we just talked about culture, but it definitely is a culture thing where it at the base level, teaching is not looked at in the same light as, for example, the medical profession or even the dental profession or many other types of professions. It's kind of like, oh, you just did that, where many of us, I mean, we know so many awesome people, Mike, that could do any job.
Sure.
But instead they chose to work with students and really, I mean, are super powerful, impactful educators, and they do it because they're passionate about it and because they're freaking awesome at it too. And you're right. I mean, it would be awesome if at the societal level, and in other countries, it really does happen. It's really different where you do put your educators at the top of the pedestal and say, my goodness, you're a teacher that is awesome. That's such an important part of, our entire society.
I actually, you brought up something that I thought of, and when I was first reading it, and I forgot about it now. And this idea that there are teachers that could have chosen anything, and that's totally, listen. I'm a teacher trying to start a media company, and I'm not saying I'm an expert at this, but I'm learning a lot, and I think I can do it. Yeah. That's, I guess, the point. Justin Trudeau was a teacher, and now he's the Prime Minister of Canada.
That's awesome.
These teachers, there's a lot of educators that could frankly do whatever they wanted. They choose teaching.
Yes.
And I was also, you had mentioned doctors and dentists and the respect that they got, but I'll be honest, I think that it's degrading in a lot of different areas. And what I thought of when I was reading this was the question about autism and vaccines. Okay. And that you have millions, hundreds of thousands of doctors and scientists telling you that there's no connection between vaccines and autism and vaccines and, frankly, almost anything. And yet there are people that say, I don't care that you're a doctor. I don't care that you've spent your entire life educating yourself and doing research. I know what's best for my kid. and blah 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 blah, right?
Sure.
It is exactly the same thing as what's happening in school with educators. And I think that it's one of the most destructive, not to get too political, but it's definitely one of the most destructive legacies of Ronald Reagan. And this is the feeling that the government isn't on your side, that it isn't looking out for people, and that it does is siphon money from you and do nothing for you. And that attitude has filtered down over the last 35 years into education, into nursing, into all of these things, and into being a doctor. And so, no, I don't necessarily feel respected as a teacher, even in Ontario. And I'm sure that you don't either, at least in some ways. What do you think?
No, I mean, and the biggest takeaway for me is that we as a society have a lot to still work on in just the concept of the educational field, and to say that it's such an important, we talk about this all the time on this podcast, to say maybe we need to really look at education and say, gosh, it should be super expensive, as you always say. We should be putting all of our money into it because it's so important. It's not just something that people just do. It's something that is an integral element of a highly functioning society, so that you don't have, a whole bunch of people end up going to prison, a whole bunch of people out of work, a whole bunch of people feeling just that their society doesn't care about them. Do you know what I mean? And so that's that. I just think that in itself is we're a long ways away, I think. But as far as feeling respected as a teacher, we have a lot of work to do.
A lot of work to do, and we're not gonna solve all these problems in one segment, in one podcast.
No.
So we will, I'm sure, talk about this as the years go on. But when we come back, we'll talk to Josh Feinsilber, the creator of Gimkit.
Friends, On Podcast Media is getting set to launch not one, but 2 new podcasts this summer. And we're excited to tell you about the first one, On Politics. On Politics is hosted by politician, professor, and human rights lawyer Craig Scott. On Politics will take deep dives into policy and politics. You definitely come away learning something every week. To stay up to date with On Politics, follow the show's Twitter account, @OnPoliticsPod. Welcome back, everyone. We're so excited to have the creator of Gimkit on the show today, Josh Feinsilber. Josh, can you tell our audience a bit about yourself?
Yeah, for sure. Well, first, thanks for having me on, obviously. So I'm currently a junior in high school, and it's May right now, so I'm going to be heading into my senior year. And I go to high school about 25 minutes outside of Seattle. And I made a classroom quiz game called Gimkit, and I guess that's what we're going to be talking about today.
Absolutely. And the Gimkit app or web application game has taken the EdTech community by storm. Mike and I are passionate about educational technologies, especially ones that work really well, and especially ones that are related to game-based learning. And it has an overwhelmingly positive response to the game. And has that surprised you?
Oh yeah, of course. I think, it's been quite crazy. And I think that because I'm just surprised it has caught on so much and it's gotten such a great response, because I still have a hard time pitching it to people.
Sure.
So when I, am like catching up with someone and they're asking, what's going on now with you, Josh? And I'm explaining to them, okay, I do this, classroom quiz game thing, and I pitch it. It still sounds weird to me. I can't quite phrase it in a way that, that makes sense. And I totally get that. So I start with the pitch, of, all right, it's this quiz game where you earn money and you buy upgrades, and so like, this is probably a problem, but I can't even kind of explain it in a great way. And so I'm surprised that, since all of our growth has been through word of mouth,
sure.
I'm surprised that other teachers have been able to do that for us. So yeah, for sure. And also when we were coming up with the idea for this, I did very little idea validation. So I did do research on kind of what problem we were trying to solve, but I didn't do a good amount of research to figure out if this was the right solution. It was kind of just like, all right, let's try it. And so yeah, for sure, I never would have thought that some weird mixture of all these different elements together would have garnered such a great response. But yeah, it's been crazy. So
awesome. Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
The word of mouth, in particular, has blown me away. This is spreading like crazy, and everyone is sharing with everyone. That must feel really good that you're getting validation not from your peers, but frankly from your teachers and other teachers. That must feel really, really good.
Yeah, it does, and especially as I said, we've done very little to no marketing on this, and so as I said, all of it's been through word of mouth. And so it's been slow for a while. We launched back the day before Halloween of 2017, and we had like a weird name situation. We had a different name back then. We had to change the name, so we stayed quiet for a month, and we changed the name. And then we're like, all right, I was ready to go spread this with everyone. I was like, all right, I made this. Let's go spread this with everyone. But then I came to the realization that I've only been working on this for a couple months. Our competitors, alternatives have teams, VC money, been working on this for years. It's like, all right, let me spend a little bit more time working on the product before I go spread it with everyone. Sure. So that's what I've been doing. But yeah, it has been crazy because it has come very recently. It's been it's been about the past 6 weeks has when it's really kind of just amped up like crazy. So it kind of did come out of nowhere, but it's been slow for a while.
That is awesome. So the game reminds me of a little bit of Kahoot, but not really. And then it has some elements that I do like about, like, for example, a game like Quizlet Live, but it's better. So when you were developing this and you were like, okay, I'm going to come up with this game, did you look at those other kind of models and you're like, I need to make this better? Or where did you come up with the idea about creating it?
Yeah, sure. So I guess I'll explain kind of how I got the opportunity to make this in the first place. So I went to a traditional high school in 9th grade. And then my school district said, hey, next year we're opening up this new school. It's project-based. So you work on projects as your schoolwork, no classes, no grades. And I'm like, oh, yeah, this is great. I would love to work on projects as my schoolwork. So I started going to the school last year. Yes. And I worked on a variety of projects throughout the year. And towards the tail end of last school year, when I was a sophomore in May, I had finished a project and I wanted to do something new to really challenge myself. And so this Gimkit actually first started off by me looking at this technology that I wanted to learn, which basically allows for somewhat real-time communication. So if you can imagine like a chat application, you press send and it gets sent right away. I wanted to try something like that. So that's actually the first, the first piece of Gimkit was actually I made a very, very simple chat application. And I thought this technology was really cool. And I said, all right, how can I take this further? And so I thought back to traditional school, and I really loved using Kahoot and Quizlet Live. I didn't ever use quizzes in school, but I definitely used Quizlet Live and Kahoot, and I really loved the two. Okay. And I thought, okay, well, I really like them, but I certainly think they could be better. And so from there, I went on, and maybe this is the wrong question to ask, but I went around asking teachers and students, interviewing them, trying to figure out what they didn't like about Kahoot. And from there, I got the main 3 pain points from each side, and that's kind of what we try to fix in Gimkit. And I think maybe why it was the wrong question to ask is because I think just because you use Gimkit doesn't mean you shouldn't use Kahoot or quizzes or Quizlet Live. I think each of the products serves a good place in the classroom for different things. And so I think where Gimkit has kind of fallen into place is as like a classroom activity and a review game. And I think Kahoot really strives as actually a place to introduce new content. And the reason why I think that is because the teacher sets the pace of the game. Okay. Yes. Whereas something like Quizlet Live or Gimkit or quizzes, the students set the pace of the game, right? So I think it's much better for review, but when you're trying to learn something new, I think Kahoot is much better. And I think a lot of people use Kahoot for review. And so that's where I think those major pain points came in, which we've tried to solve. But anyway, so I got those 3 major pain points. We bounced solutions, and somehow we got to the idea of this money thing, which I'm not quite sure how we got there. But then I coded the first version over the summer, and I guess the rest is history.
Yeah, that's a super awesome story. And then number one, that you actually made it happen.
Thank
a
you.
lot of us have ideas that we were like, oh, it'd be cool if we could do this. But then for whatever reason, we let life get in the way or whatever it might be, and we don't, end up following through to the fullest extent. You did this all within that year. That's just amazing. So I'd really like to hear more about the school, this project-based learning school. And Mike and I are always fascinated with models that really put students at the forefront and let, student choice and student voice be what, where all of the assignments come from. For example, your project was something you came up with. So how does this system work? More like how does your school work? I think, do you have a mentorship program, or how did you learn, develop your skills?
Yeah, sure. So I think the first important thing to say is that, my school is actually still a public school. And so there are things that we still have to abide to from state laws. But the thing that really made the school work is that we got a waiver from the state that basically said we can earn competencies by doing projects, and that will convert to credits. So
Awesome.
We do projects at our school, but we have to complete certain competencies. And these competencies somewhat aligned to Common Core, but they're much more open. So instead of having to learn about this specific time in history, there would just be more general history competencies, and you can choose kind of any period of time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does.
We can pretty much work on whatever projects we want. We just have to be able to, fill in those competencies. And I've been pretty lucky that all my project work, I've never had to really worry about competencies. I've just been able to do work that challenges myself, and the competencies have kind of just come naturally. And I think it's because the school did a good job of actually trying to make the competencies align to some real world work. So that's kind of the whole point of my school, is we want to do work that is real world learning.
That's awesome. Yes.
Yeah.
I love that connection. I mean, it's like, I hear that a lot from my students, that they're 16 and 17 years old. They already have ideas about what they want to go ahead and do and what they want to pursue as far as the skills, and they're ready to do that. And I think a lot of times we limit them with our current structures, with our 5-period day or 7-period day, and making them go through certain things when they're ready to go ahead and start being able to pursue things. Like, this is a legitimate company that you started, and I mean, it's amazing, and that's something that I want other students to be able to do. So talking about this, Mike and I talk a lot about monetization of educational apps, and we are on opposite ends about that. So we've had different arguments about monetization. So we know that Gimkit offers 5 free kits, or it basically would be the games where you put in the vocab or whatever it is that you're trying to review. And then you have a subscription model for purchase. Have you received any feedback on the pricing of the game, or where does that come from, Josh?
Yeah, for sure. We've obviously received a ton of feedback on it. I would say most people fit into one of 3 groups. I find when I'm online and looking at some software that I can often also follow one of these 3 groups. So I think the first group is people that can't believe that we're charging for this. That, like, really? You're charging for this? This costs money? And so that's the first group. And I do get that sometimes. And I think it's because there's so much mediocre software out there.
Yes.
There's so much mediocre stuff. And so when something possibly good comes along and you want to charge for it, it's like, oh, well, I'm so used to this mediocre stuff that's free. And I think that's also another thing, is there's so much free software out there.
Yes.
That when you want to charge for something, it's like, oh, well, no, Kahoot, Quizzes, Quizlet Live, they're all free. Absolutely not. I think it's also because you're not quite able to see the effort that goes into building something. Like, for most items you purchase, you can see if you can hold something physical, or you can see someone doing a task. But on the internet, you can't see the hours that go in that maintaining support and creating the product and coding it. Right? It's hard to see that. I think that is part of that goes into it. But I get it too. I can often fall into this group for software. But I think the 2 other groups are a little bit more simple. There's one that people find paying for it, and a lot of time they like the product, and they also just like our store, and they want to support us. And then, I'd say probably the least popular group is the people that think it should be priced higher. But I'd say most people fall into one of those two groups. Most people in the second one where they're fine paying for it, but they don't think it should be priced any higher.
The reality is everyone should have an opportunity to use their knowledge and experience and work and time to earn an income doing what they want to do. And, go make your money, Josh. I mean, I think it's awesome. Do what you can to build the product. We've talked a lot about a couple other big apps and systems and programs that have had to sell or change. We were talking about Edmodo a couple weeks ago. Everyone knows who Edmodo is, and they still couldn't make it work on their own. They couldn't bootstrap it. They couldn't even do it with VC. They still had to end up selling to a much larger Chinese company just to stay in business. And it's hard out there. So, things cost money. Work costs money. Labor costs money. And hiring programmers isn't cheap. And, so I think that asking for a nominal subscription fee is perfectly fine. And like you said, there are people that are just going to not pay for it or not want to pay for it, and you have a free option that covers that, and that's a choice that people make. And so I'm happy with it. I'm gonna be giving this a go in September, and I'm really excited to use it, and I think you'll have a subscriber in me as well.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it.
And I will definitely subscribe just because, like what you just finished saying earlier, I love the story of this. I love the ability that you have just proven that our high school students have so much potential if we just give them the opportunity, skills, and time to be able to develop those things. They could do some awesome stuff. I mean, this is just one thing. You came up with this within that year. Who knows what else you could be able to come up with as you're able to go in and have the time and opportunity to do that. So actually that leads me into my next question. What are your future plans with Gimkit? And are you thinking about working on like another app? And then obviously next year is your senior year in high school. And are you planning on college or what's in the future for you, Josh?
Yeah. So the goal for this year and after high school is to get Gimkit in a place where I can actually work on it full time right out of high school. That's the goal. That would be great. So that's what I would love to have happen for this year and then out of high school. And about 6 weeks ago, it looked like they had about a 2% chance, but now the chance of that happening is increasing, so it's becoming more and more likely. So that's the goal. That's what I'm going to be trying to work towards this year, is to get Gimkit in a place where I can continue to work on it after high school, because I would love to be able to continue working on it and support it. And then, I think a couple of things are going to go into that. One, the summer's coming up, so we'll see how much drop off there is and how much people come back if we can kind of keep the hype that's going around Gimkit going into September. But yeah, in terms of future plans, that's kind of it. Long term and then kind of short term, we're going to be redoing the game over the summer, still keeping the core gameplay concepts, but the design right now is a little bit is not flexible enough. So we want to add new upgrades and new concepts to the gameplay, and our current design is it's too limiting on that. So we're going to be redoing that over the summer, so we can add some nice new upgrades when teachers come back.
That's awesome. And thanks so much, Josh, for being on the show today. We will definitely be supporting Gimkit and everything that you guys are working on in the future. This is such an awesome, inspirational story, and hopefully we can actually get some students to be able to go ahead, some teachers to pass on this story to their students, because, like I said, this show is just basically what's possible, again, if we set up the parameters for students to be able to do awesome things. So congratulations, man, on the company.
Hey, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks, Josh. On Education is an on-podcast media production. My name is Mike Washburn. My co-host is Glen Irvin. You can get in touch with us or ask us questions to answer on air by visiting our website, oneducationpodcast.com. You can tweet us at oneducationpod. Glen is at Irv Spanish on Twitter. I can be found on Twitter at Mr. Washburn. Our sound engineer is Jake Codeweiss. He's on Twitter at JK Radio. You can find us on Facebook by visiting facebook.com/oneducationpod. If you're enjoying the show and think others would too, we would be honored if you shared it with them. please leave us a rating or review in Apple Podcasts or the Google Play Store. When you leave a rating, it gives our rankings a boost. This helps others discover the show. We want to thank our presenting sponsor, Schoology, for supporting us. Check out Schoology.com to learn how they can help you advance what's possible. Thanks as always for listening. Stay awesome. See you soon.